Good evening, everyone. In this evening, we are going to discuss about the suggest suitable task given the content standard and the performance standard. First, we have here our objective, which at the end of the lesson, student will be able to identify suitable performance tasks based on the given content and performance standards, and also create clear and fair criteria or rubrics to evaluate the performance. So now let's discuss the criteria for determining suitability of a task. We have here the alignment to standard. So in alignment to standard, the task must directly reflect the knowledge and the skills stated in the content and the performance standard. So this criteria used to evaluate a performance task that must clearly match what students are expected to learn, to ensure that the assessment truly measure the intended knowledge, skill, and understanding, or not something unrelated. Kasi kapag hindi align ang performance task sa content standard and sa performance standard, it will lead to unsuitability of the task. So, when criteria are aligned, teachers can accurately judge if the student achieved the learning goals. So next criteria for determining suitability of a task is the authenticity. So the authenticity is when the task should mirror a real-life applications or meaningful use of learning. It is according to Wiggins and Bakhtai. So here in authenticity, we should check if the task allow the students to apply in learning or in a realistic or contextual scenarios. So next is the cognitive demand. So in cognitive demand, the task should match the level of thinking or expected, like for example, the analysis or creation. So we should use the Bloom's taxonomy to ensure that the task requires appropriate cognitive process, so that we can determine the suitability of the performance assessment task to the content standard and the performance standard. So next, we have this clarity and feasibility. So the task should be clearly defined, feasible, and accessible with the rubrics. It is according to POFAM. So it ensures that the instructions are clear, timely, and the resources are appropriate. And the rubrics define observable performance. For example, the instructions are clearly like it identify a problem, analyze, propose, or present. And also, the materials should be accessible. Like for example, the poster, recycled items, or a free digital tools. And also, the task can be done in a small groups within a set time frame and easily accessible through a rubric. Because feasibility means that the activity can possibly do or achieve within the available resources or a given time. So next, we have here the scalability and objectivity. So here, the task should be measurable using clear criteria or rubrics, and to determine the suitability of the task, we should check if performance indicators or the scoring rubrics are specific, observable, and measurable. So, when we measure the task objectively using the clear criteria, the rubric also ensures consistent scoring and can be applied across the different class sizes or sections. And we have here an activity, identify the suitable task. Review the content standard and performance standard. Read carefully each performance task listed and identify which performance task is suitable based on its alignment with the content standard and the performance standard. Prepare to discuss and defend your chosen task and justification during our class session. And this is our content standard and the performance standard. And this is the suggested performance task. You are going to read all that task and you will identify kung saan dyan ang suitable na performance assessment task sa ating content standard and sa performance standard. So now let's move to our next topic, which is suggest appropriate criteria in evaluating the performance assessment task. So, the first criteria in evaluating the performance assessment task is align the criteria with learning targets. Ensure that each criterion reflects the content and the performance standard that being assessed. Meaning, the criteria should directly measure what the students are expected to learn based on the content and the performance standards. For example, if the learning goal is explain how photosynthesis works, the criterion could be accurately describe the process and role of sunlight, water, and the carbon dioxide. Next is define performance levels. Describe different level of master, for example, the exemplary, proficient, or the developing. So, for example, the exemplary gives a complete and clear explanation with example. The proficient give a mostly clear explanation with minor errors, and the developing give a partial or unclear explanation. So here in define performance level, we should describe what different levels of performance looks like. And next, we have the use student-friendly language. Criteria should be understandable so learners can use them for self-assessment and improvement. So, meaning, the criteria should be easy for students to understand so they can assess and improve their own work. For example, instead of writing, demonstrate conceptual understanding, diba very malalim yung mga English like it's not easy to understand. Instead of saying that, we should say, shows you really understand the idea. So the next criteria in evaluating the performance assessment task is focus on quality, not on the quantity. Evaluate the depth of understanding and skill demonstration rather than the surface level features. So we should evaluate how well the student shows understanding, not how much they write or for example, in an essay, assess clarity and depth of ideas instead of number of the paragraph, kasi mas ma-measure natin yung learning ng student if mag-base tayo sa content, not sa dami ng answer niya or sa number of paragraphs na ilalagay niya sa essay. The next criteria in evaluating performance assessment task is ensure fairness and transparency. Students should know the rubric before performing the task, or the student should know the rubric and expectations before starting the task to feel confident and prepared sa task na gagawin nila. For example, before a group project, the teacher should shows the rubric and explain that grades will be based on collaboration, accuracy, and the creativity. And here is an example of criteria or the rubric. Just post the video if you want to read it, or for you to better understand the content, that what would be the content of the criteria or the rubric. And we have here our activity, understanding appropriate criteria in evaluating performance assessment. You will answer this activity and present it in class. So the directions are: read each statement carefully, write T if the statement is true, and F if it is false. Prepare a justification for your answer in our class. So that would be all, and thank you and good luck!